You know, I'm talking off the cuff here because basically wearing this mask not only makes me look stupid right here in Horror and Coffee, right? But it does give me some perspective about what I'm going to talk to you about in this episode. So let's get to it. I was thinking about a topic and I couldn't think of a topic, and then I consulted my Horror and Coffee co-founder, Victor, right? And he suggested this amongst other topics, and I thought this one was a good one. I was like, you know what, I haven't done this yet. And it's about Friday the 13th. That's right. It's about good old Jason Voorhees. And what I'm going to do this week is I'm going to give you my rundown from worst to best of the entire Friday the 13th franchise. Now, this is going to exclude the remake, and it's going to exclude Freddy vs. Jason, because I feel like those two films are kind of like a mind of their own. They're their own thing, and whereas the rest of the other movies kind of still link. Now, here's the problem with that. Personally, in my opinion, only 1 to 4 is really what I would consider the true Friday the 13th, parts 1 to 4. So you know off the bat that I'm going to have those movies in the top 4. Not in that particular order, though. So get ready for that. But because the other films were made, I have to acknowledge that they exist. As much as I don't like it. But, Jason Voorhees is an iconic figure in horror, right? Along with all the other greats, and you gotta give credit where it's due. You know, this mask is legendary. All right, so here we go. Starting from the worst to the best. The worst one, in my opinion, the worst Friday the 13th movie is Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Yeah. I went to the movies to see this with a group of friends, and we both came out of there like, I can't even believe they wasted so much film on that crap. It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. First of all, it follows after the other film. I'm going to mention it, I'm going to mention it later, The New Blood, but Jason follows this boat all the way to New York City, where he starts walking around in Times Square like it's all good, right? And he's looking up at the lights, and everybody's like looking at him, and it's weird. It's weird. He looks out of place. He's not in the woods. He's in the city, and it was stupid. And I'm going to tell you something right now. The majority of this film, you can tell, wasn't even shot in New York City. Did you see the subways? I grew up here, born and raised, Bronx bred, New York City. I've ridden the subways all my life. And when I saw those subway cars that he was walking through to chase after the protagonist in that movie, I was like, that is not a New York City subway. That is not a New York City subway. First of all, they didn't even look like that anymore. Okay? And when they did, they didn't still look like that. Okay? Because all the graffiti and what, I was like, come on, man. It was such a stereotype of how New York is, how whack it is or whatever. And I'm like, I was looking at that like, are you kidding me? That is not New York, you know? So definitely it was bad. The kills were stupid. They were comical. It reminded me of a Bugs Bunny cartoon. The majority of the later Jason films do. So I'm not bringing up anything new here. All right, my next one is Jason X. Now, I have a little soft spot, admittingly, for Jason X because I like sci-fi. So to have him be transformed from this crazy killer and then put in some kind of freezing state 2 centuries into the future where he wakes up, they bring him out of the freeze, and he goes on a killing spree on the ship in space, right? And he's and then first he looks like his regular Jason self, and then they think they kill him, but then what happens is he becomes this cyborg looking thing out of something out of a James Cameron film or something. It was weird. Now, admittingly, he looked kind of cool, but at the same time, the story was stupid. The characters were stupid. And some of the acting, in my opinion, was stupid. And I don't think I would want to blame the actors in and of themselves for that. I blame the writing. Okay, the writing. Because the writing... Bleh. Okay, here's the next one. Ready? Counting down now. Friday the 13th, Part 5. A New Beginning. I went to the movies to see this, and, all I could tell you about Friday the 13th, Part 5 was that, first of all, it wasn't even Jason. It was like a copycat, right? It was like the disgruntled man whose son got killed earlier in the film, and he just went on some kind of killing spree. Meanwhile, poor Tommy Jarvis, played by this other guy, all right, that wasn't the Tommy from Part 4, was kind of like going through some post-traumatic stress issues, and you see that happening in this film as well. It was just stupid all around. Like, the idea that this was actually Jason, led people to believe that it was, and it really wasn't. And you kind of knew it from the get. All right, it wasn't a shock. So yeah, Friday the 13th Part 5 was bad, and they shouldn't have made it. I mean that. Okay, the next one was The New Blood. All right, that's the next worst. It's getting better now. It's getting better. New Blood isn't so bad. New Blood is actually Part 7, technically, and it follows this girl with like psychic powers, like Carrie or something, or she's like a Jedi and crap. Like she can move things with her mind and stuff. So she uses these powers to fight Jason, as Jason is trying to kill everybody in the woods and everything, in the usual camping grounds where he's normally adjusted to. But this woman this young girl going through this conflict within herself, she struggles with these psychic powers. What happens? She becomes the good guy at the end, and the protagonist, so to speak, and she fights Jason toe to toe using her mind. Her mind. You see, at this point in the franchise, you could tell already that people were the writers were stretching it. They were stretching it because they were running out of ideas. So they were like, hey, why don't we get somebody that's like Carrie? Carrie versus Jason, basically. That's what it was. Except Carrie was more scary. Much scarier. Next one is getting better now. It's actually Part 6. Jason Lives. When Tommy Jarvis accidentally brings Jason back to life in some kind of Frankenstein-style fashioned electricity pole thing that reanimates his corpse. And what bugged me out was, why did they have a grave for him to begin with? Like, why did they want to even make that sacred or something? I mean, this was the most notorious, most horrible, most evil serial killer next to Michael Myers. But no, they had to have a nice grave. I wonder if anybody left flowers in that joint those years that Tommy was growing up. Who knows, right? I don't know. Okay, it gets better. And this one, I actually kind of liked more, even though it was still stupid. Ready? Jason Goes to Hell, which is technically Part 9. The whole idea is that Jason gets killed, but his soul possesses, another person or other people. I kind of forgot if it was more than one person. And he does his Jason thing, right? And there are things in that movie that are hilarious, like the way he punches this woman's face in, and oh god, it's terrible. Jason Goes to Hell essentially is a movie that wanted to wrap up the entire Friday the 13th franchise and put an end to it. One, they should have put an end to it after Part 4. Two, it was very funny the way the kills were. The kills were comical. The kills were not scary anymore. You laughed at it. It was a comedy. It was a comedy. Not to mention, they brought in the Book of the Dead from Evil Dead. You see it in this movie, like as if it had some kind of significance in regards to why Jason kept on living the way he did. No matter how much you killed him, no matter what you did to him, he kept on coming back. Those are those movies ranked from worst to bit better, bit better. Now I'm gonna get into the last four of the series. Now, you would think I would say part 1 to 4 chronologically that way, but I'm not. Part 4, I'm sorry, part 1 is actually my number 4 in the list. Okay? Not because it was bad, but because, first of all, you didn't really see Jason until the very end of it. Second of all, it was it was low budget at the time when it was made, and it was definitely like a movie that was biting off the heels of Halloween, which, Michael Myers was first. There was a Michael Myers before there was a Jason, and the whole idea was that the whole movie you're trying to figure out who's the one killing all these camp kids and stuff like that, only to find out it's this woman, Pamela Voorhees, because she was disgruntled and she went crazy because her son Jason, who was some kind of a developmentally deformed kid, drowned in the lake while the campers were having their wee ha-ha, right? They reopened the camp. The killing resumed. Alice being the last character in the film, our final girl, so to speak, cuts her head off. That was really good. But the very end, when she's in the boat and Jason himself finally appears and pops out of the water and drags her down under, don't tell me that didn't make everybody shake in that theater. It did. I'm sure it did. I wasn't in the theater to see that one, but when I first saw it, it freaked me out. All right, number 3. Best. Part 2. I liked part 2. Part 2 was very good. Part 2 continued where part 1 left off, and that was when you finally saw Jason begin his career as the killer, right? He had to avenge his mother's death. First, his mother was avenging his death. Now he's avenging her death. It had all these good deaths, and then that's when you really started seeing the pattern here. And again, it was, in my opinion, it bit off of Halloween, right? You have sex, you die. That's what it was. That's all that part 2 and part 3 was, for the most part. And part 4, you have sex, you die. Hey, let's have sex, and then we die. Then Jason kills us, right? And Jason didn't have the hockey mask on yet at that point. He had a kind of like a sack over his head with one hole for an eye and stuff. But at the very end, it was another scary moment when he crashes through the wall and without the mask, without the bag on his head, so you see his deformed face, grab the girl and make off with her. That was great. Our second best in the ranking of Friday the 13th is part 3. Part 3. That was when Jason finally got his mask, and it was on. It was great. He got it from this kid who's walking around with a hockey mask, pretending he was cool and whatnot when he wasn't. And eventually he kind of kept it. He said, you know what, I'm going to stick with this one for a while. It was in that movie where you see this mark right here, where this cut area, that part 3 was where that first happened, because the last girl that was surviving the onslaught, drove an axe right there into the mask, into his head, and he reached out for her. He kept on trying, and because it was in 3D, it made it even scarier. When the movie first came out, they gave you 3D glasses to see it. This was at a time in the early 80s when 3D, they was trying to make a 3D a comeback, and it did come back for a little bit, but it was a great horror film. Finally, the number 1 best Friday the 13th movie was, of course, those of you who've known me for years know that this one is my favorite. It's Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. In my opinion, the true final chapter. Like, the other movies didn't have to be made after that. It really didn't. It could have ended on there, and that would have been perfect. It would have been right. And you see Jason, how he survived and how he recovered from his supposed death at the end of part 3, and then he comes back to the camp areas to kill the next group of kids that are hanging out there, and he takes them out systematically, one by one. Corkscrew, a spear, crushing head against the, bathroom tiles, and I mean, there's so much there. It was very good. Threw a dog out the window, I think. Even. It was like, wow, he took it that level. And this was the mask. This mask is actually, if I put it on, is of the part 4. Okay, I bought this at Brooklyn Comic Con a few weeks ago. And, I asked him, I want the mask from part 4. And this is the mask he gave me. So I think this is actually works. Yeah, guys, part 4 was definitely, in my opinion, the best. I saw it in the movie theater. I saw it, I think, twice in the movie theater. But that first night I saw it, it was amazing. It was so much fun. People were screaming. People were scared. People were really reacting. There was kind of like a definite interaction between the screen and the audience that didn't take away from the fun of the movie itself. It was like being on, if I was ever going to be on a roller coaster, it would definitely, this movie was as close to it as it would ever be. Friday the 13th is one of those franchises that will always be, it's left an indelible mark, basically, in the horror genre for years to come, for generations to come. People are going to, and they're going to make more of these movies at some point, right? It's going to come. It's happening. It's going to happen. They did a remake. They did the Freddy versus Jason thing. They're going to keep going with it. Something's going to keep going with it. It's not going to end. Screw it. I'm looking forward to seeing what else they make. I'm a horror critic. What do you want me to do? Not watch it? Of course I'm going to watch it so I can criticize it or speak highly of it. What are your thoughts on these Friday the 13th movies? What is your favorite? What is your top? What is your worst? Rank from best to worst, from worst to best. However you want to put it, down in the comments below. Talk to me, comment below. Share with me what you think of this ranking that I gave. One of the greatest horror film franchises ever to come out of cinema. I'm talking about the Friday the 13th movies. This is Ralph Perez, Horror and Coffee. Here, take a sip. Take a sip right there. Take a sip. Are you thirsty? Take care, guys, all right? Later.